When it comes to creating custom applications, too many of us live in denial. We want to believe that it's possible to accurately predict how long it will take to build software that meets our requirements. We also want to believe that we can know what those requirements are up front and that the requirements won't change during development. Sadly, none of these things are true for most projects. We can't predict how long development will take, largely because we can't get the requirements right up front, and we can't stop them from changing. Because we deny these realities, lots of organizations still use development processes that just don't work well. Fortunately, this is changing. Agile development processes get more popular every day, primarily because they're rooted in reality. They're designed to accommodate change. This style of software development can be scary at first, especially for the business people who are footing the bill. But this needn't be the case. The truth is that agile processes are usually better, both for development teams and for the business that pays them. They have real business benefits. To understand why this is true, we need to start by understanding what an agile process really is. In every development project, the challenge is always the same. We're building software in the face of uncertainty. In a traditional development process, we do our best to pretend that this uncertainty doesn't exist. For example, with the classic waterfall approach, an organization creates detailed plans and precise schedules before anybody writes any code. But real development projects rarely comply with these plans and schedules. The core reason for this is that even though we use the term software engineering, writing code isn't like other kinds of engineering. In traditional engineering projects like building a bridge, it's usually possible to define stable requirements up front. Once you've done this, creating plans and schedules based on experience is straightforward. But building software just isn't like this. In fact, maybe we should stop talking about software engineering. The term is misleading. Creating stable requirements up front is usually impossible, partly because people don't know what they want until they see it. Uncertainty is unavoidable. Traditional development processes work against this reality. But agile processes are designed for this situation. Rather than resisting change, an agile process embraces it by giving us a chance to add and change requirements during development. To do this, agile development relies on iteration, rather than the traditional approach of first defining all the requirements, then writing all the code, then testing that code. An agile process does these things over and over in discrete iterations. Each iteration creates more of the finished product, with the last iteration producing the final result. And while the process begins with an initial set of requirements, you also have the chance to add, remove, and modify requirements at the start of each iteration. All of this helps the development process adapt to changes that happen along the way. Lots of different agile processes exist today, but the most popular is almost certainly Scrum. Scrum is simple to understand, and it gives us a concrete example of how agile development works. A key idea in Scrum is the notion of a product owner. A person in this role represents the sponsor of the project, such as a business group that's paying for it. The product owner doesn't need to understand code. It's not a technical role. But he or she does need to have a clear sense of what the software should do. Here's a look at the basics of Scrum from the perspective of the product owner. Like agile processes in general, Scrum is iterative. As seen by the product owner, each iteration has 4 steps. First, the product owner creates and prioritizes a list of items to be done. This list is called the product backlog, and it contains all of the requirements for the product. It's a dynamic thing, as we'll see. What's on the list will change with each iteration. Next, based on priorities defined by the product owner, the development team and the product owner choose items from the product backlog for the sprint backlog. These items will be implemented by the development team during a sprint, which typically lasts between 2 and 4 weeks. The development team now implements the chosen items. How they do this is entirely up to them, but the result of the sprint should be potentially shippable software, a usable implementation of the items in the sprint backlog. Once the sprint is over, the dev team demonstrates the implementation to the product owner. This hands-on experience with the software lets the product owner understand what's really being created. He or she can then give intelligent feedback, such as suggestions for new or changed features that become part of the product backlog for the next iteration. Other requirements might also have changed during the sprint, and so the next iteration starts again with step 1. This process continues until one of 3 things happens. The project runs out of money, the time allocated for the project expires, or ideally, all of the items on the product backlog are implemented. Notice how different this is from a waterfall development process. Agile development still needs a plan, but the plan is only detailed on an iteration by iteration basis. And progress is not defined by adherence to a predefined schedule. Instead, it's measured by the amount of usable software created, which is the thing you really care about. Developers like Agile processes for a bunch of reasons. But organizations shouldn't adopt Agile processes just because they make developers happier. They should adopt them because of the business benefits they bring. Those benefits are very real, and they include these. First, the development team is more likely to create what the business really needs. The product owner, who represents the business, remember, is directly responsible for creating and prioritizing the items in the product backlog. The dev team builds the most important things first, and so the sponsor is much more likely to get what it most wants, even if it can't afford to get everything. And because the process is iterative, there are many chances to make changes, even near the end of the project. Second, the product owner has a better understanding of what's being created during the project. He or she has direct visibility into the project at every iteration and can change what happens in the next one. Nothing beats seeing and using early versions of software. It's by far the best way to understand what the software's users really need. Also, the risk of a failed project is reduced. Agile's iterative approach lets you measure the right thing, which is whether you're getting the software you want. In a traditional process, you can only measure whether the project matches the plan, which is not what you really care about. Without an Agile process, you don't know whether you've gotten the right software until the project is over, when it's too late to do anything about it. Adopting an Agile process also changes how a development team interacts with its business sponsor. One obvious change is that the business sponsor must be involved throughout the project. Rather than defining requirements up front and hoping the team delivers the right thing, the product owner plays an active role in each iteration. The business sponsor should also expect continually improved business value, expressed in working software, rather than precise compliance with a long-term plan. This changes how project management is done, which can upset traditional project managers. It's fair to say that people in this role can sometimes find the move to Agile processes uncomfortable. Also, what a development group promises its business sponsor changes. Unlike traditional development processes, An Agile process doesn't try to precisely nail down time, budget, and scope of work at the start of a project. This can feel alien, especially if you're dealing with an outside development firm. Most business sponsors are used to contracts that specify a fixed set of features built in a fixed amount of time for a fixed price. Traditional processes commonly promise this. But it's important to realize that those promises are lies. Unless the project really does let you define an unchanging set of requirements up front, which is rare, expecting this is a recipe for disappointment. Being better at writing custom software brings a competitive advantage to an organization. To get this advantage, we have to give up the illusion that we can accurately define up front all the requirements and timelines for a development project. We have to embrace reality. Believing that you can use a predictable process when you can't is dangerous. It doesn't help. What does help is adopting a process designed to accommodate change. What helps is agile development.